Hello, hello, and welcome to the Comtivate show and the conversation with leaders. Of course, my name is Sharon Johnson, and I'm always excited about these shows. Now, when we had this vision about conversation with leaders, it started out just trying to get folks to hear from other leaders, hear their perspectives, hear what they can do, understand leadership more. And I get excited every time I do these because I get to learn. And today, I get to learn again from one of the world's global leader, one who's rocking the world, and she is going to talk about leadership. My friend Deb is in studio with me, and I'm just going to introduce you to Deb, let her tell you who she is, and we're going to start this conversation. Hi, Deb. Good afternoon, good morning, world, and good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, Sharon, it is so good to see you. You and I have known each other for several years, and I have been blessed to have the opportunity to be in your leadership in your space for some time.
Absolutely. And I know you're doing so many things, and you're all the way from New York City. And I just know that you have so much to share with us. So we want to talk about leadership and talk about, in this crisis that people have so many platforms, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They could go anywhere, find anything. But you and I know that it matters who you learn from, right?
Yeah.
And so what we hope here is to just share with folks about leadership so they could learn from us and really say to themselves at the end of our conversation, I want to try that. I want to apply what I hear today. So I'm just going to start off by asking you that great question about leadership. Like, what is leadership? Why is it so important today?
Oh my gosh. How many hours do we have, Sharon?
Wow, I'm telling you, we could talk for hours.
Well, the reason I asked the question is because, when I was a child growing up in the Bronx in New York City, leadership to me meant something very different than it does today. Sort of as a corporate coach and CEO of my own company. But I will say there's a similar theme.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that leadership at its very best. So there's bad leadership. Like I've met gang members, right? Like I've had to negotiate with gang members not to beat somebody up, right? And then leadership at its very best is when we're able to influence a result for positive. So I've influenced a result to try to negate a negative.
Wow.
But I see that leadership for me today, and has been for quite some time, is the ability to influence outcomes in people.
Absolutely. Outcomes in people. And so we're certainly, right now, we know the outcome of all of this. Now, some folks say we're post-COVID, right? And there are folks they're leading people. There's so many leaders. And even now, I'm hearing that leaders, I heard someone said, I've never led during a crisis. And it makes me think, well, it seems as if we're always in a crisis. What changes with your leadership today than it would have done yesterday? And so as you talk about the outcome, there's so many things that people want to know about. What do I do? What are some parts of leadership that I need to know more of now? Because there may be someone who is running a team and their engagement wasn't the best before. And even now, I would say it's the opportune time for a leader to really get their team up.
Yeah.
If they're not leading effectively or know how to lead effectively, that could pose a problem. So what can you share with us with that thought?
I think one of the things that I've seen in leadership today, you see it in politics, I see it in local community. Right now, I'm smack in the middle of the COVID crisis here in the New York metropolitan area. And whether it's government or community or church leadership or corporate leadership, there's a struggle between how do we keep people safe and still move into our mission. And what I love about those two questions is that it's not either of those questions is not the right answer. It really is the combination of where those questions intersect that makes the most difference to people. And I think leaders today are starting to see, although a painful way to get there, I must add, that we are starting to see that it is both of those questions that matters, not one, but both.
Wow. And so what should they do?
Yeah, so for a lot of businesses, again, it depends from a business perspective or a community perspective, it depends on your business or community. So where I am right now, in the Long Island area of New York, so we're right in the hotbed. The odds of us opening up in a big way soon, we're probably at least 4 to 6 weeks at best away from that.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things I'm starting to see, and I think businesses are too, I look at the local businesses that I am coaching. So local business leaders that I'm coaching, some of them are in the medical supply industry. So they're busy. They've
Mm,
got a lot going on, they have to show up day in and day out. And for them, it's about how do we keep our employees safe and still be productive.
right.
So that's sort of their intersection. For others, Sharon, if I could point out, it's about how do we look at business today? What do we need to do to change so that we can step forward into the way business should be done today in a safe way when we are ready to reopen? And they're doing that prep work. I look at fitness businesses, I look at non-essential service businesses today, non-medical, non-supportive services. They're really they're trying to feel their way into it. And one of the things, if you don't mind me saying,
Oh, absolutely.
is that I see, and I just had this discussion today. I was having a mastermind call with a group of leaders, business leaders across the globe, actually, a couple of different countries. And we're talking about what it takes to re-engage in a positive way. One of the things we see that it takes, there has to be a certain tolerance for failure.
Mm,
You have to have a certain risk tolerance because these are uncharted waters each of us are in. None of us, unless you've been around from 1918, which I suspect not too many of us are, even me as old as I am, um, you know, this is the first time that we're having to face a pandemic to the degree that we are.
mhm.
So that means everything we're doing is very new and there's a high degree of risk. And as long as we're comfortable with that risk, we could potentially enjoy the reward. And that those that are not comfortable with the risk, those that pull back from the risk, they don't have the potential to have that reward on the other side.
I love how you put that, the risk tolerance. And that truly, as you mentioned that, I think of the ways that the conversations that people are having, especially in the workplace. How do we reinvent? How
Mm.
do we reinvest? And how do we refocus? And I want to add to that, when we are in the pool of risk, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
and you mentioned that you're coaching, and I know you're just a great coach, and with your just level of experience, what are some things maybe someone, Deb, is listening and say, well, I run a business and I run that risk right now. I'm in that place where running a risk is so big for me and I'm not sure what to do. What would you advise that person to do?
Oh, this goes back to a conversation I was having yesterday with somebody, a CEO of a very large company here in New York. We're talking about the risk, reward um, ratio. And one of the blessings, I mean, it really is a blessing of the current situation, is that when you're in the situation of a
Mhm.
crisis,
Yes.
as we are today, if we use that crisis as an opportunity for us to take a risk that maybe naturally we wouldn't take this risk in an ordinary day, that if we take the risk and it fails miserably, if it's horrible outcomes, we can always blame the COVID virus crisis.
Blame it on COVID.
It's like, oh yeah, oh sorry, it was COVID-19, it was the coronavirus, that's why it failed,
I love it.
right? But in a natural day, we would never take that level of risk. Most senior leaders would not, take that level of risk because they're afraid that, they don't want to be judged horribly for making a mistake. But one of the things your mentor and mine, John Maxwell, talks about
Yeah.
is failing forward.
Yeah.
That, and John uses such beautiful illustrations on how other leaders, how other businesses, how other people have dealt with that failure before. And when I read stories of failure before, I realize, and so do my clients, and so do yours, that there's a lot to be gained from failure. If we just fail and keep doing the same stupid things over and over again, we really haven't learned. But if we fail, we reflect, we
Yeah.
adjust, and then we re-enter. That's the cycle that John teaches. Then I got to tell you, Sharon, folks like you, man, you're always right at the forefront of success because that's exactly what you're doing.
Thank you, Deb, for that. I love it how you talk about re-enter, right? When we look at this circle, I call it the circle of life, truly what's happening now. And
Mm,
we don't know where the circle ends, but what we know is that, and
yeah.
you talk about it, the ability to reflect and to re-enter. And so in a conversation I had with one leader, we talked so much about moving out of our comfort zone, right? And COVID-19 has certainly taken us out of our comfort zone. And some people, the longer they stay home, they may feel very comfortable at home, right? Now, as
Yeah.
a leader, you're sitting there and you have your team, and you touch some of those points. And as a leader like myself, when you have a team, and if your team is, they're working remote, they're doing other things, if your team tend to slip off in that comfort zone, right? And as a leader, how do you get your team back
Mm,
to start thinking differently? Life is different. When we look at social intelligence and we look at what it entails now, leaders, I believe, should be focusing on engagement and social intelligence, looking for, wow, how do I get my team to come back, refocus,
yeah.
re-enter? What are some thoughts you have on that?
Oh my gosh. There's so much that goes into that. One of the key things I think that I'm working with a lot of my clients today on a re-engagement strategy. So what's the re-engagement strategy? Because for a lot of clients, they've had their team, they've had to work from home, they've had to work remotely. Some of them have not had to work at all, but they're remote, right? And how do you re-engage them? How do you get that engagement level back up again? I think one of the keys, Sharon, is first of all, to go back to the vision.
Ah,
What is the vision? What do we really want to accomplish? Who are we really serving? That helps people to see a much bigger picture.
mhm.
I think the second thing is trust. How do we really, how do we build trust between each other, leader to team member? How do we have these conversations where, I'll give you a great example if I could. I was hearing a story recently of a business leader who for the past 6 weeks has called their team once a day. So every day at 9 a.m. they have a meeting, they have a huddle, and in that huddle the leader's like, okay team, like it's Tuesday, here's what we need to accomplish today.
Mm.
Right? And okay, team, it's Wednesday. Here's what we need to accomplish today. Okay, team, it's Thursday. Here's what we need to accomplish today. And the leader had heard a seminar that said, you really should connect with your team. Before you try to extract value from them, you
Yep.
might want to try to add value to them, right? So the next phone call, the team member, the leader was like, okay, team, it's Friday. I'm supposed to add value to you. So let me hear. What are you struggling with right now with the
Oh my
COVID
goodness.
virus? What's going on? And it's like, oh,
Oh
dude, you
no.
so miss the point. It's not about just checking off the box and say you checked in with your team. It's about picking up the phone and saying, hey, Sharon, I know where you are in Texas. I know it can't be easy where you are right now.
Abs-
How are you? No, really, really, Sharon, how are you? And
And that
asking
hurts.
the question, yeah. And it makes such a difference for people. So that's another very big kind of engagement strategy, is really make sure we're connecting with team members. And then the last thing I would share very quickly is that once team members are back in the groove, so they may be back on the job, so to speak, but the rules of the job have changed
Yes.
because of governmental regulations. So maybe if you're a fitness center and maybe now you can only have 25% of your,
Right. Yeah.
occupancy, right? Same thing with a restaurant, whatever it is. So one of the ways to, I think, to really help re-engage your staff is to say, hey team, we are only going to have 25% of our client base in front of us at any one time. Here's what's really crucial.
That's
We need to treat them like gold.
big.
What can we do to add value to them, to exceed their expectations, to overserve them, to make them feel as welcome as we know we feel that they are? So I think those are 3 easy things that every leader can use today, Sharon.
Wow, I believe you, and I thank you for those thoughts because I'm telling you, if I get that phone call, and matter of fact, what manager that I know, I've gotten a phone call, and it makes me feel so good. And what you've just talked about, Deb, reminds me of Gallup. So I'm a certified
Mm.
Gallup ambassador,
Yeah,
and the 12 elements of engagement is what you're really talking about.
exactly.
Yeah, when we think about even now, when we think of the pyramid, if one should just imagine a pyramid and put 4 parts to it, at the very broadest section where you add all that value, that's the foundational section. That's where people psychologically are thinking, well, what am I going to get? What am I going to get? What am I going to get when I get back to
Yes.
work? Yeah, and the manager leader should really be ready to say, well, here's what expected of you. Here, this is what you need to do your job, right? Taking them to an elevated level of now I've got those
Mm-hmm.
things. I'm going to give more of myself.
Yep.
And now the manager starts to give them an opportunity to be their best, to recognize them, to care for them, to ask them, like that leader should have, what
Mm-hmm.
matters to them most. I say leadership, Deb, is a heart situation. I think
Mm.
it comes from the heart. You can't lead if you're not winning people's heart because
Yes.
that's how you get their hands, right? And to your point. So I just have so many questions for you, and you're just making me start to wind up.
I love it.
But I want to know, Deb, so they're out there now and they're ready to go back. And they're going to meet those leaders who will be afraid of the risk factors, or a leader who's ready to embrace those risk factors. So, as individuals going back into those workplace, they have these expectations, right? Should the leader write that out, have it listed somewhere? What
Mm.
could be some strategies that leader uses to really get people back into that? I call it the state of believability or trust.
Yeah, I love that question, Sharon. You're right. There are a lot of expectations that happen, and oftentimes those expectations go unexpressed.
Yeah.
Like we know in our mind what the expectation is, but we haven't really shared it with anybody else. So the first thing I would say is it starts with a dialogue,
Mm,
not a monologue where the leader is telling them everything,
yes.
but where the leader is asking questions. Hey, now that we're opening up, if we wanted to make every client, every customer, every address, feel great about doing business with us, what do you think it would look like?
Mm,
And engage them, ask them questions first. Because oftentimes they know what the difference maker is, but a lot of times no one's really asked them. The
mm,
second thing is once they share with you what their ideas are, find the one that resonates, find the one that you believe really is a winning strategy, and
mm.
compliment them and engage them on testing it for you. Hey, I love that idea, Sharon. Sharon, could we do this for the next 2 weeks? Could you and I engage in an experiment? Could you do that with every client for the next 2 weeks? And then report back to me what you've seen.
Wow.
So engage them to be your beta tester.
Mhm.
And then thirdly, once that beta test is done, if it's a winning strategy, have that team member help engage the rest of the team on what they did, how they did it, what was the outcome. Because team members tend to learn best from each other.
Yes.
And the more we can help have that peer-to-peer teaching, the more they're going to, first of all, they are really smart because they're the closest to the client, and they can really help you and I to engage the rest of the team in a much more profound way.
Wow. Well, I hope somebody's taking notes because I mean, I've got it. Thank you, Deb, for those profound explanations right now. And so, folks, you've heard it, that there's a lot more that we can hear, or you can contact Deb or myself and just to find out more. And here's what I truly want of people, and John talks about this when we talk about leading during post-COVID, or even let's lead in your life. I mean, in my opinion, I strongly believe that the leader needs to show up. And he's talked about that because when the leader shows up, there's something about the leader. When that leader shows up, like my daughter, I shared it to you, and I shared some leadership lessons with her because she's just starting her second lieutenant in the U.S. Army. As a matter of fact, if you're watching this and you've served, thank you for serving. And if you're an essential worker,
thank you. Exactly.
Yeah, I want to make sure I put that in there. But the leadership lesson I told my daughter, when you show up, what you're showing up with is you're showing up because you're there and you're making your presence known. And when you show up, you're saying, okay, here's the direction we are going to go into, not I am going to go into, right? So I'm teaching her about that we language versus the I language. And I even mentioned to her, make sure you have clarity. You're young, so find out for the facts versus emotions. We're operating with your facts and show with clarity so that when you give directions, they're not confusing or frustrating. And then I talk about hope, which people need hope. Gallup just did a study on COVID-19 and post-COVID. 3 things they talk about: leadership, they talk about trust, and hope. Deb, I'd love to just touch hope for a minute as a strength leader, right?
Yeah.
How can a leader show up with hope? What does that look like in your eyes?
Yeah, it's so funny. Sharon, John Maxwell teaches you and I both that, it's so interesting as a leader when you're going through a crisis like we're going through right now. Like a pandemic comes around once every 100 years, right? So in the situation that we're currently, it's so easy to lose hope. If you look at the science, if you listen to the media, if, whatever political side of the spectrum you're on, it really doesn't matter. It's a very divisive situation. But I'm a woman of faith unabashedly. So I have a faith that there's a much bigger purpose to everything that's happening. But even well beyond faith, that as an organization, as a country, as a world, we have been through difficult times before. I was around for the 1970 gas crisis. I was in the corporate world for the 2001, September 11th, right here in New York City, personally affected by it. 2008, a crisis economically. We have been through crises before. The difference, and this I think is the key for your listeners, the difference is, what are we learning about ourselves and the world around us through this crisis? And what does that mean? How can we engage? So I look at it from my perspective as a coach and a business leader. How can I serve people better? How can I add much more value to them? How can I serve them and their teams in this very difficult time when right now a lot of employees are held hostage, if you will, at home?
Oh, yes.
So they're available for learning remotely. And if they're not taking advantage of that time, if they walk into being quarantined the same way that they walk out of being quarantined weeks later, they've missed an incredible opportunity to learn. And I'm telling you, folks, if you're hearing this right now through Sharon and the Comtivate show, it is not too late to change. It is not too late to glean a great lesson of growth.
Absolutely. Thank you. On that note, I'm telling you, you've said it. And we hope that people will really do it. Motivation, gets us going, right? But discipline keeps us going. And it's the
Right.
discipline of walking out of COVID being far better. They say more billionaires and millionaires will be birthed, more authors, more speakers, more
That's
leaders.
right.
And that is a hope for this conversation. Deb, at Comtivate, my one purpose in life is to help leaders and all individuals maximize their God-given potential. And I use the God-given potential as a woman of faith. I believe that the greatest gift that we have received from God, that gift of life and potential. And I believe that the greatest gift to give back to God is to maximize that potential. And so that's why I want to have these conversations. And again, going back to the purpose of Comtivate, to help leaders maximize their God-given potential, then enhance and add value to the lives of others.
Love it.
Deb, thank you for adding so much value to us today.
Oh, my
So
pleasure.
would you recommend a book or a quote, or what would you recommend? A book, what's your favorite, one of those?
Well, first of all, I would recommend people connect more deeply with you because Sharon, you are really an outstanding leader who can help them to see and unearth. Here's the real key. Each of us have been gifted with certain strengths and talents and potential. Unearthing that, sometimes maybe like me, you've grown up in an environment that told you everything you did wrong versus everything you did right. And a coach like Sharon can help you to unearth that potential and bring it into the forefront of what you're doing today. So I would just encourage them to connect with you.
All right. Thank you so much. Folks, you've heard it from the best. They said straight out of New York City, right?
Exactly.
Straight out of
Woohoo!
New York. So wonderful. Thank you again for joining this call. And I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do, because I just want to glean into Deb. Absolutely. And thank you, Deb. Listen, folks, stay beautiful, stay fabulous, stay motivated, know where to find me, Comtivate or drsharonjohnson.net. Get over on the online academy, Cola at comtivate.com, and just check it out. All the classes, courses, and this conversation will be in the Conversation with Leaders landing page. So thanks again for joining. And Debbie, you are beautiful. Thank you, lady. Thank you for your heart of gold.
Thank you,
Thank
my
you for
friend.
blessing lives and changing lives and being the strength leader that you are. I pray that you will be continually blessed and stay safe in New York City. Okay? Thank you,
Will
my
do.
friend. Stay well. Bye-bye.